So to start with, part of the challenge with team management, team leadership, anything that involves the word leadership, it is a challenge because we are increasingly moving into a time of understanding that our own comprehension of the word leadership may need to shift. But the balancing act that is a challenge when you are in a position of managing and leading groups of people is this tension between the need to support and develop the purpose of the team, and at the same time manage and direct the practice, what the team is doing and what the team needs to achieve. The need to balance care, so care for the people in the team with growth and correction. So part of growth is the ability to discipline or correct and to manage things that are not going so well. And then intention is also held this need to develop culture with the need to also support increasing levels of capability to grow people's skills. And part of the challenge is that this is not a static balance. So it's not like you get it, it's dynamic. It keeps on shifting between all of these various elements of what needs to be achieved for that team to function optimally. And key to that balance, the balance doesn't come in on the things on the end of the pole. It doesn't come in the weight that comes through the purpose, care, culture arm or the practice, growth, capability arm. The balance comes in the center. It comes in the ability of the person holding these things in tension, or the group sometimes it's a group holding them in tension, to maintain their intent, to maintain their own inner sense of balance, calm, capacity to handle this cycling dynamic tension between the things that need to be cared for and achieved. And so the first element that I'd like for us to think about together, and this is a really important element, as far in my experience, there is no ability to lead others unless there is an ability to have insight and to understand and to spend time on your own inner world and on understanding and caring for your purpose and intent and how that shows up in the world. And so really to start our conversation, what I'd like for us to discuss together is how we can go about caring for our own intent. And listed on this slide are a few extraordinarily simple practices. These are very, very simple practices. Many of you on this call are established and experienced leaders. You've had years and years of experience in leading teams, and I'm sure that you will concur that this moment of understanding that how I am being and feeling in myself actually is the pivot point for how I am being and managing my team. There are many more ways to look after your own inner intent, but these are a couple to start and maybe to integrate. So the best way to start habits is with something tiny and really easy to do, and that doesn't take a ton of time. So the three that I've listed here are the concept of daily journaling. Daily journaling is extremely powerful. If you don't like writing, you can doodle or draw. It has a very similar effect. Or you can find another way that allows you to, you can almost just, it helps to have this mind-hand connection. So the doodling is almost a way of allowing your mind free to think. And as you think, allowing that to translate into something drawn. How to practice daily journaling in the simplest and easiest possible way is not to attach any particular meaning to it. It's not writing lists. It's not thinking about what you have to do. It's not even thinking back over what has happened, although it can be. It's literally a practice of as close to the time that you get up in the morning. But if you can't manage that, at least to find a 5-minute period, a 10-minute period early on in the day where you can sit down uninterrupted and take a pen and have a book or a piece of, it can just be a piece of paper, but it helps to have a specific book that you keep, and just take that pen and without thinking about what you are going to write, to start writing, and to write 3 pages without stopping, without pausing, and with no need to ever read it again. It's a way of dumping what's happening in your mind and allowing it to bypass your analytical brain, and really allowing your subconscious to have a sense of relief. The second exercise is very simple. It can be done in less than a minute. It's quite good to take about 2 minutes to do it, but it can literally be done in less than a minute. It can be done between meetings. If you find yourself coming out of a very stressful meeting and having to go into another engagement with someone else and you're feeling very flustered, you can use this particular breathing exercise. It's very simple. We're going to practice it just now before we go into our next breakaway room. It's called box breathing. And all that is required is that you find a little bit of a quiet, still spot. You can literally go into the bathroom, close the cubicle door, stand behind the door, and do this exercise for a minute. And what you do is you take a deep breath in, you hold that breath, you take a deep breath in for 4 seconds, you hold the breath for 4 seconds, you exhale for 4 seconds, you hold that for 4 seconds, inhale again for 4, and you repeat the cycle at least 3 times. So it shouldn't take you more than a minute or 2, and it will completely change your physiological state. It will activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calming nervous system, and it will give you that sense of centeredness. We'll practice that just now together. And then the last thing, which I really would encourage, and many of you who have been through the PFP program know that this is a key part of what Partners for Possibility offers, is this ability to step into a peer support network. And a peer support network is really a group of trusted friends and colleagues with whom you can regularly come into a space with the intention of thinking together, talking together, supporting each other without judgment, with the ability to hear and listen to each other, not even to offer advice, just a space to be heard by human beings who care about you. It helps if you are in quite a rigorous leadership position, that at least some of those colleagues have similar experiences, but it's not 100% necessary. So my frame is always this concept of the circle of 7. Find 7 people and invite them into relationship, meet regularly, preferably if you can, once a week, once every 2 weeks. It doesn't have to be long, it can be virtual, but at least once a month, that you have a space to debrief and to be cared and supported. So before we go into our next breakaway room, and I have brought our next breakaway room really close because I believe that this element of self-care is something that we need to attend to and we need to create a bit of focus around. But before we go into that space, what I'd like to invite you to do is let's just practice this breathing exercise as we go into the next breakaway room. So Selwyn, you can start to set the breakaway rooms up. We'll look for 3 to 4 people in each breakaway room. And the breakaway rooms will not be extremely long. They will be about, we can have a 10-minute breakaway room again. So we can set those up meantime. As we're waiting for those to be set up, my invitation to you now is to practice this breathing exercise with me, and I will guide you through it. So you are welcome to switch your video off if you like. And what I'd like to ask you is to please take a deep breath in, sit yourself comfortably in your chair. If you can take your shoes off, you are welcome to take your shoes off. Sit yourself comfortably into your chair. Feel the soles of your feet resting against the ground beneath you and against this holding space of the earth below us, this solid space. Feel your back lengthening. Relax your arms, relax your shoulders, relax your neck. Hold your hands very lightly with the palms open and facing upwards in your lap. And together, let's go into a cycle of breathing. So I invite you to take a deep breath in for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. Breathe out for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. Breathe in for 4. Hold for 4. Breathe out for 4. Hold for 4. Breathe in for 4. Hold for 4. Breathe out for 4. Hold for 4. And then with the final breath in, you can open your eyes and feel yourself back in your chair. And just take note of how your heart feels, how your body feels, and how your mind feels. And then what we'd like to do is taking that sense of calm, which I hope that you have, into these rooms together, to go into breakaway rooms again, and to talk with each other, to share with each other, giving each other equal opportunity to share around what self-awareness and self-leadership practices do you have that keep you feeling centered and supported. And really think to the things that you do when you feel very stressed, because these are practices. So if it's walking in a garden, if it's stepping outside and looking up at the sky and just taking that moment to reframe the space that you're in, those are practices that help you. So think about what it is that helps you come back into yourself. And then the second question is to ask, do you have a peer support network that assists you in growing this sense of self-leadership and centeredness? And if so, how does that work? And not all of you may have that, but if you don't, perhaps you can talk about who might you feel would be possible to invite into such a network. All right, Selwyn, may I ask if you could just post those 2 questions into the chat group? I hope that you have them on your side, but if you could just post them into the chat group. Thank you.
I do. Rosie's already posted it in the chat. Excellent.
Oh,
Thanks,
she's
Rosie.
a super woman. Thank you, Rosie. All right, so let's go into those breakaway rooms again. It's always very nice to be in a breakaway room, because usually if you're holding the whole space, you never get to go into breakaway rooms. So thanks for the opportunity, guys, and sorry if some of you were left quietly in the middle space. And I know for some people it is challenging to kind of be in that breakaway space, particularly if you're not familiar with the unmuting and the kind of Zoom functionality. But I hope that I hope that that it's at least possible to listen in and to enjoy the conversation. Right. So then, thinking about this concept of how does one really move from staff to teams when thinking about the difference between having a group of people who are kind of working to achieve a task versus a group of people who are really connected and are able to start operating as a team and because of their connection, find that they can handle any task that comes their way. So it's the emphasis slightly changes from a task orientation to a human orientation, where the human beings in a team start to be able to really pull together. And this concept of, you can have a herd of horses, but until they're pulling in the same direction, it's really hard to achieve the things you need to achieve. And somebody has to expend a lot of energy in making that happen, versus when a team comes together, it requires the lightest of touches, because the team operates coherently. So I think key to this is being able to not shift, but actually integrate the understanding of hierarchy, because the structures that we work within often have, quite a set framework, a set sense of structure that they operate within. There is an organizational hierarchy, and it is there. We can't deny that it's there. So there is a hierarchy often, particularly in our education space. But because education is so human, we're dealing with people, not with products. We really need, this needs to happen, I believe, in every environment, but really in spaces where one's dealing with human beings, it's essential, is to be able to flip that thinking and understand how the hierarchy might look when viewed through a different lens and viewed from a different plane. And being able to recognize that a hierarchy that might look like that, when you turn it on its side, you can start to see how it could actually look like a network, how actually that structure, instead of being about the vertical flow of command and control, can become about this horizontal flow, ripple of inspiration and support and network. So I hope that's a helpful model. It doesn't mean that the hierarchy is not there, because often our roles put us in socially kind of more dominant spaces. But if we can flip that and think about that as being invested with this wonderful honor of being able to ripple inspiration outwards through your network, through your team, so that there's the sense of wholeness about the team. And people don't feel that they are less or more than. They start feeling that they're connected in with each other, and they just sit in different spaces of what their function and role is, but that they can support each other both upwards, across, and sideways. That's really helpful. What is it? Starting to conceptualize that further. This is a beautiful little model, which I just wanted to share with you, because for me, it explains so well how our team systems work. They're not flat, they are not mechanical, they're dynamic, and they are all about relationships. And if you can start to see the dynamics of the team less in terms of the nodes and the individuals that sit in those spaces, and more in terms of the relational the relational connections that are happening with that group of people, you start to be able to see where are the not hot spots, but where are the kind of dynamic, vibrant spots? Where are the places that maybe need more attention because there's a lot of separation, and need attention to be drawn to the relationships around team members that help to bring them closer into a dynamic structure and network. And some of the elements that you can attend to, or you can start to think about, and it might be useful to almost take a piece of paper and a pen at some point and map this out for the team that you work with. Doesn't mean a judgment, it's just kind of getting a feeling for what's happening in these relationships. But you have elements that are around, so clustering, building trust, and building trust is often about the ability to hold space and about how we create and generate that ability. There are elements of betweenness, so that there may be individuals that link groups, and that allow for information to flow. And it's really important to know who these are when you need to communicate into a large group of people.
Kelly,
There's
3,
close.
5, 10, 15.
Selwyn, do you want to just mute everybody and then I'll unmute myself again? Okay. There's closeness. So how tight are some of these relationships? There's degree. So there's kind of how many relationships. Some people might have 1 or 2. Some people might have 40. And then there's brokerage. So there's this particularly wonderful role of brokerage. It's a concept I love because I am a connector, but this ability to connect groups that belong together, but that might not have a linkage yet. And knowing who those people are in your team is very powerful. It can help a lot to facilitate communication across the team. Taking that concept, one can then really start to expand that out and understand what are the kinds of relational team networks or relational dynamics that make for very strong teams. And so there's this concept of strong versus weak social ties. So strong social ties are when many different elements have many different sets of relationships with many other elements, and there's a lot of cross pollination and reinforcement of relational safety. Weak social ties tend to be where there is only one linkage into a group, or only linkages to only one person, and that can be really stressful for the one person because they become it's exhausting. They become kind of what everybody draws on for strength and support. There's no resilience within those groupings. In a similar way, if you have clusters of relationships, weak bridges or narrow bridges, things where information travels slowly, tend to be where there's only one link between clusters or few links between clusters. Wide bridges are when there are multiple links. And when there are multiple links between different groupings of people, again, this really facilitates the development of a strong culture because information is shared easily without needing to apply huge effort into finding those one linkage channels for information and understanding. So the third thing that I would like to move on to with us is starting to think about how does one start to develop these types of relational networks? What kind of behavior, what kind of techniques, if you like, methods, but it's more than that. It's almost the intention with which you go into this team building space are helpful to build strong networks, strong relational spaces. So the first thing that is really important, if you have the responsibility, the hierarchical responsibility, the sort of positional responsibility of leading a team, one of the most powerful things that you can learn how to do is to learn how to hold space well. So what you do when you are holding space is you're basically creating an anchor within which relationships can be developed and strengthened, and safety can be felt, and people then start to be able to just release their guard a little bit and let their real thinking come through. And when you allow that real thinking to come through, this is when you tap into people's gifts and talents, and when you start to enable them to really feel that they are part of a team and want to actively contribute. So in terms of holding space, there are two elements. There is an element around in that role where you have the positional responsibility for a team, creating adequate space for accessibility one-on-one. So we discussed this some time ago in a session that was run across the continent, and something that was really exciting coming back from it was having a principal come back and speak about having had this conversation. She decided that she would go back, and in her school, she would set aside half an hour a week, not a huge amount of time, but half an hour a week in which she explicitly made it clear that this was a time when you could come to her office and talk about anything. And she would be present and she would listen. And what that did was completely shifted the dynamic, because suddenly people felt that there was accessibility. And remarkably, initially there was not huge uptake. Then there was a kind of flurry of uptake. And after that, it calmed right down. But just the knowledge that you are accessible as a leader, there is a safe space to come and talk about things. There is somebody who's done enough of their inner work to be able to hold that. So it's not a judgmental space, although things may come up that require addressing, can create a remarkable difference in how held a team feels. The second dynamic, and really this is creating a space where we are looking at the human first and the task later. So there are always tasks to be completed. I don't think we have any challenge with the difficulty. Well, we do have challenges with the difficulty, but we all have an awareness of the fact that there is a huge amount of practical task-orientated work that needs to be done. But if you take this principle of creating some accessibility and really positioning the human first, you're not going to leave the task, but the task comes after you've engaged in relationship with the person. It can shift everything about how that conversation about the task goes. So there is then this element that the task matters too. So it's not a case of touchy-feely, nice and everything is fantastic and people do what they are asked to do and nobody has any problems because you are such a nice person. No, there is always areas when you are working with groups of people, when there are specific tasks that need to be achieved, when we have to deal with tasks not being completed, issues with time management, issues with all kinds of issues, and you will know what those are in your own context. But these are just a few guidelines around how to deal with those difficult conversations around tasks that need to be addressed, and there needs to be some management of how they are being addressed or some correction.